In the news tonight, Jordan and the international community endorsed the kingdom's response plan to the Syrian crisis. The UN envoy for Syria says a ceasefire in the civil war is largely holding, but aid is not getting through to besieged areas. And France's president says talks in Paris on the Middle East peace process are not meant to replace bilateral negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. A royal decree was issued appointing His Royal Highness Prince Hashim bin Hussein Chief Chamberlain as of January 12, 2017. Another decree accepted the resignation of Chief Chamberlain, His Royal Highness Prince Riyad bin Zayed, with immediate effect. In a message to Prince Riyad, His Majesty the King said that he appreciated the Prince's relentless efforts during his tenure as Chief Chamberlain, which spanned 4 decades. He commended Prince Riyad's dedication to the throne and his service to the country for 40 years. The government and the international community endorsed the 2017-2019 Jordan response plan to the Syrian crisis. The plan was approved at a meeting of the Jordan Response Platform for the Syria Crisis, chaired by Prime Minister Hani Molki. The Prime Minister said the Syrian refugee problem is a dilemma with a greater global proportions. He said Jordan, a small country with meager resources, needs a financial, humanitarian and sectoral response from the world community. Molki also reiterated Jordan's stance in support of a peaceful solution to the Syrian crisis that ensures the country's territorial integrity. Molki voiced the hope that international aid to Jordan would double to enable the kingdom to keep up with the pace of services to the refugees. Minister of Planning and International Cooperation Imad Fakhoury said the estimated overall cost of the response plan stands at a $7.6 billion, while the funding from the international community amounted to about 54% of the needed funds. Jordan condemned a terrorist attack that targeted a police checkpoint near a hospital in Egypt's city of Al Arish in northern Sinai. State Minister for Media Affairs and the government spokesperson Mohammed Momeni also denounced other terrorist attacks against Egyptian soldiers and police that killed or injured a number of people. He expressed Jordan's solidarity with Egypt in fighting terrorism and extended Jordan's condolences to the families of the victims and wished the injured speedy recovery. Momeni renewed Jordan's call for concerted world efforts to fight terrorism. The ceasefire in Syria is holding for the most part, but humanitarian aid is still not getting through to besieged areas. UN envoy Staffan de Mistura also said fighting was still going on in 2 villages in the Wadi Barada Valley despite ceasefire. More in this report.
Syria's cessation of hostilities was largely holding, aside from some exceptions. UN Special Envoy for Syria Staffan de Mistura said humanitarian aid was still not getting to besieged areas despite the ceasefire. He told reporters that 23 buses and Syrian drivers used in recent evacuations were being stopped from leaving the villages of Foua and Kfraya in Idlib province by armed groups. He also addressed the water supply issue in the Wadi Araba Valley, the site of water pumping facilities serving Damascus.
The information we have is that 5 villages in the Wadi area have reached an arrangement with the government. That is good news. But 2 villages, in particular one which is the one holding the actual source of water, Al-Fija, is at the moment have not yet reached an agreement.
Despite the ceasefire, the Syrian army said it had advanced in the village of Basima in Wadi Barada. Mistura said fighting was still going on in 2 villages in the Barada Valley, which serves more than 5 million people in Damascus. He said 5 other villages in the area had reached an agreement with the government to stop hostilities. Water engineers are ready to repair the damaged facility, Mistura said, although 2 attempts to do so had been blocked by armed groups. In other ceasefire breaches, airstrikes hit the Syrian city of Idlib. A video showed the immediate aftermath of 3 airstrikes over the city. A huge cloud of smoke is seen rising among buildings following the attack. A witness said women and children were injured and are in a critical condition. Hala Dababne for the news at 10.
Iraqi forces joined flanks in northern Mosul and drove back Daesh militants in the southeast. Forces from the elite counter-terrorism service said they took control of the 7th Nisan and Sadiq districts. Iraqi forces also clashed with the militants in the southern district of Sumar, seeking to build on gains along the Tigris river bank. Soldiers said that they were moving closer to the southern part of the river that runs through the city. Daesh, however, still holds all Mosul districts west of the river. The International Red Cross Committee said it commended measures being taken during the battle for Mosul to reduce civilian casualties and adhere to the laws of war.
After a couple of weeks in a camp, people are really eager to go back. What I also see is a lot of children which need to go to school. And of course, this is a gap now in their education which must not last too long, and therefore it will be critical to have a stabilization of the situation which allows people to go back.
French President François Hollande said planned talks in Paris to discuss the Middle East peace process do not aim to replace bilateral negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. France, which has repeatedly tried to breathe new life into the peace process, will convene some 70 countries for the talks on Sunday. The communique for the meeting is expected to call on both sides to restate their commitment to the two-state solution. It would also ask the protagonists to refrain from unilateral steps that prejudge the outcome of final status negotiations in order to rebuild trust and create a path back to meaningful direct negotiations. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the Paris talks would be rigged against Israel, which has announced it would not participate. Israeli officials reject the concept of an international conference, saying that only direct talks between Israeli and the Palestinians could bring a sustainable solution. But Palestinians voice hopes that the conference will bear fruit. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's pick to lead the Pentagon told Congress the United States must be ready to confront Russian behavior in areas where the two countries cannot cooperate. The remarks by retired Marine General James Mattis in responses to questions from Congress are likely to set the tone for a Senate Armed Services Committee confirmation hearing. In his opening statement, Mattis made the case that he can lead the military as a civilian, even after a 44-year military career. During the hearing, Mattis was asked about Russia and the world order that has been in place since World War II.
I think it's under the biggest attack since World War II, sir, and that's from Russia, from terrorist groups, and with what China is doing in the South China Sea.
Meanwhile, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's Secretary of State nominee Rex Tillerson urged the United States to re-engage with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to become more involved in Syria and in the Middle East. Tillerson was pointing to Ankara's recent easing of tensions with Moscow, which helped facilitate a countrywide ceasefire in Syria.
Syria, Turkey, and Iran are dictating the terms of how things are going to play out in Syria today, absent our participation. So I think it's a re-engagement with our traditional allies, sharing with them where we believe we have to now go in Syria.
Lawmakers from Turkey's ruling AK party and the main opposition Republican People's Party clashed during a debate at the General Assembly on constitutional changes. The proposed changes would have President Tayyip Erdogan sweeping new powers as an executive president. Brawls erupted as a lawmaker from AK party tried to prevent an opposition MP, Fatma Kaplan, from filming the voting session with her mobile. Lawmakers from two parties traded kicks and punches as the acting parliament speaker adjourned the session. MPs cast their vote for individual articles in an open voting session to ratify the 18-article bill. The opposition party argues that constitutional changes should be voted in a secret voting session according to the Constitution. Drivers in Scotland face a miserable commute as snow and blizzard conditions swept across the UK. Lines of non-moving traffic were seen on the southbound carriageway of the M74, with drivers forced to wait while the roads were gritted. Snow fell steadily as lorries, vans and cars came to a standstill or moved slowly because of the bad weather. The UK Met Office has issued a yellow warning for wind and snow across Scotland. Graham Taylor, the former England football manager, has died at the age of 72. Taylor, who had a playing career with Grimsby Town and Lincoln City, was a successful manager in England football's top flight with Watford and Aston Villa. He was best known as England manager between 1990 and 1993, when he was widely criticised for failing to take the national team to the 1994 World Cup finals. And finally, the weather forecast: very cold in the hilly areas, Badia and eastern plains tonight, with a low of 2 degrees in Amman. The Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea can also expect a relatively cold day Friday. Frost formation is also in the forecast in the late hours of tonight in many regions, including the northern Jordan Valley. Tomorrow it will continue to be very cold in most parts of the kingdom, with low clouds and a slight chance for drizzles in the north. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a mild day Friday, with a high of 19 degrees, northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to close our top stories once again, Jordan and the international community endorse the kingdom's response plan to the Syrian crisis. The UN envoy for Syria says a ceasefire in the civil war is largely holding, but aid is not getting through the besieged areas. And France's president says talks in Paris on the Middle East peace process are not meant to replace bilateral negotiations between Israelis and Palestinians. And with that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Leo Balkar. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you tomorrow.